Approaching every election year, there are 4 pieces to a puzzle when it comes to the NPP and the NDC that we must figure out before we hit December 7. Now, the 4 pieces, NDC has 2 of those pieces, and the NPP has 2. For the NDC, the first piece on that chessboard that they moved and fixed in place was the election of John Dramani Mahama as his flag bearer. And then the second piece they put in place very, very quickly right after that was the selection of Jane Nana Opoku as his running mate. Then come the NPP's 2 pieces. The first piece was settled last year with the election of Vice President Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia as the flag bearer, the first Muslim candidate to lead the party into a major elections. It is left with that last and final piece, his running mate. It is no wonder that speculations are rife, and we're getting pretty close to the announcement now. As you know, the vice president is traveling tomorrow, and sources say when he returns, we should see him present his choice of a running mate before the party's Council of Elders, before the party's executives, for a decision that then we get to know. But even before that, we've seen today the National Investment in the National Investigations Bureau put out a survey. They didn't put it out. We, as we call it here, we secured a copy through our own means, which we've been talking about all day. I want to settle now and look at it a bit more closely. So this NPP strategic choice, will NAPO tip the scales for the NPP? It's a fundamental question we are asking on the back of what we've seen today in the National Investigations Bureau survey that was done last week, Wednesday to Friday. This is the second one they've done this year alone. And if you know anything about politics and how it's done, the NIB, previously you know them as the BNI, they do this regularly. I'm pretty sure they have one on the NDC too, and they have one of who may win the elections this year also overall. We'll try and see if we can lay our hands on that exclusively for you as well as we approach the December 7th. This, after all, is your election headquarters. If somebody's cooking something that we need to know about, no matter how private, we'll get it for you. Now, this is what they did in terms of the individuals they polled. And I'll come to who they polled specifically. They polled a few individuals within the NDC, within the NPP itself, right? But they were polling opinions about who will best serve the party as a running mate this year. And they put into that hat Dr. Opoku Prempeh, who you know is the energy minister. They had in there Yahya Duchum, who is the education minister, Apostle Opoku. And by the way, that name is an interesting name. It's a fascinating one indeed. Because we were told very strongly a few months back that because Dr. Bawumia is a Muslim, is the first Muslim to lead a major political party in the NPP, certainly, and he's from the north, he will definitely need a Christian partner in an election because he will need a Christian vote. And so there were a few people, strong voices around him who say you need to consider a member of the clergy, and a very powerful one at that. If you look at the Pentecost Church, it's one of the largest denominations we have in this country. And if you have him on that ticket, guaranteed you'll get a sizable chunk of the number on your side. And so this was part of that, what was pitched to him. And no wonder, among the NDC base, when the question was asked, they threw in this particular name also. I thought that was a very interesting one to also look at. And then, of course, you've seen the female interest in there. That says in the chief of staff, Frema Pari, also very strongly. And we know she is interested in this also. We have Brian Champon himself. And by the way, I heard something yesterday about Brian Champon, and his name actually came up as they considered the list of people who can partner Bawumia. And in the last few weeks, you've seen the controversy that has engulfed him himself, his business at Rock City, as he attempts to buy 60% shares in 4 top hotels belonging to Slate, the crown jewel being the Labadi Beach Hotel. That controversy hasn't been good for him, has it? And I've heard that in the corridors of the NPP. Those who really don't want him there say you really don't want his name on the ticket, because if you do so, it's coming to bite him pretty hard in the eyes of the floating voters, the middle-class voters who will tip the scales later this year. And then you have Natoshi, another female interest there. And as you know, he's the former head of the local assembly fund, the district assembly fund, which is a very important fund in that she administers at the time. He's a member of parliament herself. And she's also there and very strong voice. I mean, she's been tipped, but she's not from the Ashanti region. She's not from the Ashanti region. And that's a fundamental line there that you need to stand on if you really want to be in the race for who becomes Baomia's running mate. I will tell you why pretty shortly. So these are the names that the party folks themselves considered. And they considered a few of them. In terms of the population that the National Investigations Bureau sampled, 5,816 party members across the country. Many of them are party executives at the constituency level, polling agents themselves of the party. So these are card-bearing members, these executives of the party across the country, telling the National Investigations Bureau officers on the ground who their preference is when it comes to the running mate to Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. That's quite a significant number. But again, remember, they are just NPP executives. They do not represent the entire electorate. And that's where the key issue is. And when my guests come into play later, after this, I'll ask them their thoughts on how much credence are they giving to this particular polling that was done by the NIB. And if you look then at the percentages that the NIB secured in talking to these 5,000 plus party executives, it's quite clear, is it not, in there? 76.27% of that 5,000 plus executives say the overwhelming choice is the energy minister. Okay? And then, of course, coming in second is Educhum himself, who is the education minister. And it's a very fascinating dynamic there being played. The two of them, one was the substantive education minister, and Educhum was the deputy. There was significant bad blood between the two of them, even after they parted ways when Opoku Prempeh went on to become the energy minister, and he then became the substantive education minister. There's still bad blood between the two of them, but they come from the Ashanti region, and they've both been considered for this particular role. But among the party's base, there's a preference there for Opoku Prempeh. And then you see names that I've interviewed in the last few months. I've interviewed Osechi Mensah. I asked him that question, do you want to be named running mate? He was very cryptic about the answer, and many said he is silently interested, considering that he's not contesting again in Swame, but he only comes in at 3.38%. And another man I interviewed this year, Joseph Usu, first Deputy Speaker of Parliament, he was outright in ruling it out. He's not interested at all. And indeed, that's one of the key things there that he put out. And yet, the members across the country put his name up as, you know, they may want him, some 2.3, but 2.27%. And then you have the chief of staff also coming in there in fourth place there. So her name is on the lips of the party's executives. Then you have others there of some 4.57%. Many, many others have put their names in the hats also. And across the country, if you speak to party members, they'll tell you this. And so that there, if you look at the Napo versus the Duchum dynamic, this is what it comes down to again, according to the NIB, by the way. It's still overwhelming favorite among the party's base across the country. And then, another thing that I thought was also interesting is when they asked the party's members they polled, there's 5,000 plus, they sort of isolate why the energy minister was their preferred candidate to be running mate. Charisma is the first thing. High popularity within the party is another one. They talk about the grassroots connections. But has he got grassroots connections beyond the Ashanti region? It's a key question we need to ask. And then also they talk about fostering party unity. And we must ask the question about that, though. Does he come across as somebody who can foster party unity, knowing that his major flaw is the way he's perceived as arrogant? And you don't have to look far. You just have to look at his response that was given when he was asked the question this year when we're facing that power crisis, where is the timetable? And he says, well, if you ask him for a timetable, come up with your own timetable. Many people didn't like that. In fact, I'll show you that even the NIB picked up on that too as an issue. The way he handled the power crisis is going to be an issue if he's named. And he needs significant rebranding, but do we have enough time for that to happen? It's a key question. So this point about fostering party unity, should we take that with a pinch of salt, or should we really put any significant value on that within the party? And Napo, a party person who can actually unite the forces, is a key question. We'll ask when my guests sit for a conversation. Another thing that we also found interesting is this Ashanti dynamic. And remember when we did analysis on the back of the primaries, right, for the presidential ticket of the party, the flag bearer race of the party, and Bawumia was significantly ahead in Mensah South. That's where Opoku Prempeh is a member of parliament, by the way. And we thought that that will come to play because he delivered significant votes to Bawumia in that context. And you know what happened in that contest with Kennedy Pong being a very dominant force there. If you compare, say, to the education minister in Bosomtwe, Bawumia was just a 60.2% victory there. And many said that is important in looking at who can help you win a few more votes. And you're talking about the Ashanti region. But why is the Ashanti region important, right? The poll also shows us that the overwhelming majority of people within the party believe that this running mate should come from the Ashanti region. The gender dynamic there is key. Males are overwhelmingly in favor of a running mate there. And if you look at a female, they want a man to be the running mate. 96%, only 6% tell us that they want a female to be a running mate there. And that's another interesting point to look at, indeed. And then, as I say there, you see the number there in terms of the Ashanti region most preferred. And we've known this for a while, that the consensus has been in the party for a great period of time that whoever emerges should come from the Ashanti region. Why is that? We've said many times here on election headquarters that for the NPP to win, they will need more than 75% of the votes in the Ashanti region to win. If they fall below that, they'll lose elections. You need somebody who can galvanize. Can Napo do that? Is a key question we'll ask my guests when I sit down for a conversation. And then you look at the comments in the report. And I want to isolate that bit there about the power crisis, which really has been something that they flagged. The third point there, the ongoing power crisis is something that they believe can impact Napo's candidacy significantly. Because remember, the 5,000 people they poll plus, they are just party people. But when you present that ticket to all voters who will be going to the polls, will they still buy this ticket? Will they buy this ticket with Napo on it, considering the power crisis and the way it was handled? Yes, the power crisis has eased significantly, but will people still remember his comment that people thought that was a slap in their face? It's a key question. We'll ask my guests when we sit for a conversation here on PM Express. You need to stay with us on this because this is a political season, and these are the conversations that we'll be having on the subject of the running mate, and we expect this to happen pretty soon. My guests will join me right after this. Stay with me. And PM Express is always brought to you by Syntex tanks. It is strong, it is tough, it is a tank for you if you really want to store water in a way that is long-lasting. It has bespoke features. You can call them across the country and they will make sure that you have it. They have 7 years warranty. No other tank in Ghana has that, and it is bespoke as well. Call them on 0244 335 168 or shop online at syntexgh.com. Syntex tanks, you're strong, you're tough. My guest joining me tonight is Theophilus Echampon. He's a political risk analyst, and he's watching this unfold very closely. Dr. John Osai Kwapon is a director for Democracy Project at the CDD, the Center for Democratic Development. Ransford Jampo is a professor of political science, University of Ghana also. And I want to start with the director of communications for the Bawumia campaign team, Dennis Miracles Obwaji. And Dennis, this NIB report, for many, is not surprising. First, because we know the NIB does these sort of polls going into an elections on almost all the parties. And as journalists, our job is to get the exclusives. And we landed one of that, which is this one. For you within the campaign, though, what's your reaction to it when you saw it and when you heard about it?
Well, Evans, good evening to Dr. Sai, good evening to Prof. Jampo, and yourself. I haven't seen any NIB reports. The NIB hasn't also submitted any such reports to Dr. Baumia or the campaign. Like I said, there is no veracity to that report because it's a PDF document that was just thrown into social media and cannot be verified. And it's quite difficult for...
Well, I can tell you, though, by the way, Miracles, that we don't deal in social media documents. And this is something that, as journalists, as you know, is what we do. And we got a copy from the original source. I thought I can tell you why.
It's not from the NIB. If it was from the NIB, I'm sure we would have a copy by now. I can tell you that for a fact. And so I believe that if there's any such documents, we would have copies. But at the moment, we haven't received any such copy. And it's quite difficult to comment on a document that I cannot verify. Tomorrow morning, anybody at all can produce a PDF document coming from any source. And I mean, that's just the point, that this is not a document that has been verified. We have checked.
By yourselves.
We haven't received any such document.
Yeah, by yourself, but we have. Yes. We indeed have. Well, I mean, and
no,
talk.
I can't speak to a document that I cannot verify its source.
Yeah, I mean, but on the subject of the running mate, though, and understand your position on this matter, because of course it's a sensitive matter, and the names there are names that we know is being considered. But I don't expect you to say that you are considering them the way they are, and so that's fine. That's fine. But let me ask you this though. You are approaching a time when you definitely must put out a name. I mean, that is a given. It will happen sooner than later. In making that assessment, is Dr. Baumia, of course he has to consult, but is he also deploying science in helping him figure out who the people, both within the party and externally as in the general electorate, may accept, such as the NIB has done?
Definitely. You keep referring to an NIB report that you yourself are not so sure if it came from.
I mean, I have said categorically, with certainty, that we have checked that. I mean, so we can move past that.
I doubt it.
Well,
but
it's okay.
Let me deal with the issue. So yes, I mean, Dr. Mahmoud Bamia definitely is going to make his decision based on science and based on data. The most important thing here is that every indicator is going to be thrown into the pot to ensure that he nominates a running mate that will fully complement him in all angles, politically and even when it comes to delivering his vision once he forms a government. Dr. Mahmoud Bamia's choice is going to be based on that individual who truly complements him in terms of who he is. I mean, he's already done a SWOT of himself. He's done a SWOT of the political party that he's leading. He's done a SWOT of our opponent. And he's quite clear who he needs, or the key indicator that would inform who he's selecting as his running mate. That person who has the strength that would fill in the gap he would have as a person in terms of his weaknesses. That person who would be able to give him the full backup as he pursues these crucial vision that he is proposing for the next chapter of the country's development. So it's truly based on science and it's based on data. And you know, politics is science. I'm a political science student from the University of Ghana, and I'm a believer of the fact that politics is science. And so that is really drive his decision.
Okay. And if the science is what you're using to come to a conclusion, then I then presuppose that Baumia definitely knows who that person is. Tell us then, tell us then in this evaluation then, what has been the overriding factor in settling on one person? Is it a person? Is it a person's ability to galvanize your base, say in Ashanti region?
Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, before he set out to announce his decision to run as a flag bearer and a Salem down, had done all he had to do, which included identify who his running mate would be. But you know, as a party, we have our own rules and regulations. And one of it is the fact that the flag bearer would nominate a running mate in consultation with the National Council. And so the convention has been that you go to the National Council and put out your nomination, and the National Council would ratify, approve, or otherwise. But he, as a person, has been clear in his mind who is nominated long before he was elected, and on November 4th during the presidential primaries. What is left now is for the time to be due based on our timelines. Then he would go and present the person. But like I said, this person politically must be politically correct, and politically correct simply means that we are going out there to go and look for votes. Definitely, we need to win before we govern. So this person must be one that will bring in the votes to support all the votes that Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia himself will be bringing. And eventually, when we win the elections based on the votes that we have collectively brought into the port, we need to govern. And in governance, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia has articulated several policy and action points for various sectors. And he would need that person who would complement his efforts and give him the right support to be able to implement and execute this vision. These are the two key or critical ingredients: the political capital you are bringing to the ticket, and then your ability to complement the flag bearer's effort once a government is formed. And these two things are what is driving him, and it's quite clear in his mind who the person is.
Let me bring in Dr. Kwapong. Doc, I heard you say this afternoon that you're really not surprised at what the NIB document is saying about the energy minister, because you're putting within the bigger context of the other polling that has happened over the period. Explain that for me, though, because we know that the energy minister, yes, he's a very formidable individual, but he also comes with a fair bit of baggage, if you like, because of the perception that he has of either being arrogant, his handling of the energy challenges that we face this year, and the comments that he's made. So why doesn't this surprise you?
So good evening, Evans, Miracles, everybody else, good evening. I think for me, the first context for why I was saying I wasn't surprised earlier on today is that, at least from the social media pages that I follow, some of the news that I see, I saw this sort of intentional, in my reading of this intentional projection of him as a potential running mate for Dr. Bawumia. Now, sometimes some of the individuals would not necessarily say that they were either sharing his pictures or giving him accolades or pointing his strengths because they want him to be their VP candidate. But I was seeing these sort of overt as well as subtle projection of him. So that was, for me, what has been imprinted on my mind whenever conversations about a potential running mate for Dr. Bawumia comes up, vis-a-vis the others. So I therefore wasn't surprised, given who the report says were polled, that perhaps it appears to be the party's preference. Or at least those who were polled, delegates, party executives, that it appeared that it was sort of reinforcing some of the things that I was seeing, perceiving, etc., etc. But the other bigger point that I was making, though, was that, at least given the person I know and having followed him, I was saying that it would become very critical for a person like that if you look at some of the polling data, specifically from the Ashanti region, right? If you start doing a regional analysis of the numbers. So a couple of things that I thought about was, so if you stretch back to Afrobarometer round 9, for example, there were many, as 21% in the Ashanti region, who were saying they would not vote when they were asked about their voting intentions. Now this is 2 years ago. Then in the most recent Global Info Analytics, it was about 23% from Ashanti. Then if you look at just by party affiliation, again, Afrobarometer round 9 showed 20% of those who identify themselves as NPP saying they won't vote. And then in the Global Info Analytics was about 25%. Last week, if you look at Prof. Smart's baseline survey, it was showing about 19% being undecided in the Ashanti region. And again, from Global Info Analytics, it was about 15%. So when I was looking at all of those numbers and then putting them again, this report that Multimedia was sharing, I said to myself, well, then you really do want a candidate who can really whip up the vote, change some of these numbers. Yes, I'm sure between Afrobarometer around 9 2022 and today, some of those sentiments have shifted. For all you know, even based on the Vice President's most recent visit to the Ashanti region, the disposition is changing. Probably now voters in the Ashanti region are more excited, feeling more energetic. But you also want to ensure that you're placing your bets on the kind of candidate that would make sure that the region that gives you, on average, almost a third of the total share of votes you've been getting in an election since 1996 can secure that for you. And as Miracle said, the political capital is critically important. And so when I was looking at it against some of these polling data and thinking, all right, who brings in that kind of political capital that you need, I wasn't necessarily surprised to see the energy minister pop up high on the list. Again, because of what I've been perceiving, some of the things I've been reading and seeing.
Yeah, but does he have what it takes, though? Because he's talking about galvanizing the base. And I saw in the thing there, uniting force. Does he have that magic to bring people who may be disenchanted? And you know what happens in the second terms of incumbent governments when they adjust their term is about, the incumbent president's term is about to expire? There tend to be apathy in their strongholds. We saw that happen to the NDC in 2016 in the Volta region. And when I was there, gathering people's views, that's when I knew something catastrophic was about to happen. Because when your own base is not as galvanized, it's not as energetic, and many of them say they're not going to be turning out to vote, but they don't vote for the opponent, but they don't vote at all, you're now in danger. The key question is the energy minister the person to galvanize that base to come and vote when they otherwise would not have done so?
In my opinion, yes. And again, this is all based on, as Dennis has said, the vice president knows who he wants. So we could even be talking about some phantom running mate whose name is not even appearing on any of the lists that we've seen. But assuming that he's a real strong potential, the person that I have followed and have observed, I don't see a reason why he won't be able to do that. To whip up the base, to get them excited about the election. Again, if you look at Prof. Smart's study, and to think of the fact that 19% in a region that gives you a third of your vote in any election saying they are undecided, I'm not necessarily sure they would cross carpets, but you also don't want them to stay at home. And so for me, I've studied him long enough and I've followed his politics from behind the scenes to say that I don't see any reason why he won't be able to do that. One of the things that I always point out in conversations with individuals is that, for example, if I think back to the implementation of the free SHS program, I always say that, and this is just my opinion, that he happened to be the right minister at the right time to be able to get the policy through, given some of the questions, some of the objections that had been raised, especially even giving some of the implementation challenges that emerged in the beginning, that you needed that strong, steady hand who could assume both, who could demonstrate both calmness when it was needed, but also demonstrate that toughness and single-mindedness that says we have a goal and that goal has to be accomplished. And so for me, when you have these skills, I don't see why you won't be able to bring in the political capital in terms of votes that the party needs, especially because there could be that possibility of apathy and maybe lagging behind in terms of the enthusiasm gap.
And I need to put that question to Miracles. Miracles, you must have evaluated the Ashanti region, right? You cannot win, history has shown, you cannot win an election, the NPP, without the Ashanti region turning out to vote in your numbers, more than 75% turning out and voting for you. Reflect on that for me among the campaign. How much is this playing into not only the selection of a running mate, but your campaign strategy? And we saw last week when Bawumia was there, that it was bigger than anywhere else it's been, right? And the visibility you brought to it was quite one that you can compare with what even did in Accra, for example. Are you aware of that, and how are you concerned about that, and how much of that gives you sleepless nights?
Evans, Ashanti would always show up for the NPP. Ashanti region would show up. Ashanti region would not disappoint the NPP. And like you rightly said, when Ashanti shows up, the NPP wins the election.
But will
we're
they?
going to put in the work. We are going to put effort. We are going to put in the energy. We are working together with the Ashanti region to ensure that we show up when the NPP need us most. We understand that politics and governance is all about what the people need. And so we are putting in all the effort to ensure that critically we're able to be there for the Ashanti region and show our scorecard, show working, so they would also show up for us. Like you rightly said, it was evidence in the tour that in all the regions that we went to, with all the euphoria and enthusiasm, Ashanti region definitely would come into the top 2 or top 3 of the regions that really showed up for Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia on the tour. And we as a party, we are counting on that. We're not only counting on that, but we are working towards that. I mean, it would be difficult for anybody to deny that amongst all the presidential candidates today, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia has been the most hardworking, has been the one that has put in a lot of effort and energy. He came in quite late. He started campaigning barely 6-7 weeks ago, and yet today it's quite evident that he is really putting the work and we're definitely going to increase the pace and increase the tempo, because we believe that when Ashanti region shows up for the NPP, we will win the elections, and we're not taking it for granted. We're not resting on that. We're not laying back on that, but we're going to also step forward and make sure that we are there for the people, and they will also be there for us.
And also joining us, and I want to pick his thoughts on this, also is Professor Ransford Jampo, who joins us quickly via phone. And Professor Jampo, thank you for joining us. And I know you have a lot of sources within the political parties, and this running mate conversation when it comes to the NPP is one that we've been talking about for a long time since he was elected. Is the next big thing. What have you picked up yourself? I mean, even before this NIB report, many sources say Napo was the obvious choice. Is that the same sentiments you also got it?
I think for me, what is important is the choice of Dr. Bawumia himself. I'm not interested in the choice of the supporters of the ruling party. At the end of the day, we should understand that the NPP support base would vote for NPP anyway, regardless of whoever is fielded as the running mate. Partisan de-alignment in developing democracies is oftentimes minimal. As in, if somebody is an MPP supporter, it is oftentimes difficult for them to be alive. The worst they can say is that, well, I'm not going to vote. But they would not move easily from MPP to NDC and vice versa. And so MPP supporters are going to be supporters of the party anyway, regardless of whoever failed. The party failed as the running mate. And so whether it is going to be Napo or whoever, for me, it depends on who the flag bearer of the party wants and who the flag bearer will be comfortable in working with. And I am not surprised, like has been expressed that by my colleague earlier, that he was also not surprised that Napo seemed to have come up at as the top. But the point is that everybody knows that he has been around for a long time, and given his persona and given who he is, it is possible that it is not surprising that he may have endeared himself to the party support base, and so people want him to be the one who can partner Dr. Bawumia. But the point is it the party's choice that matters? Are they selecting a running mate just to creep up the parties or to energize their party support base? I think that, to my mind, what is important is not really what the party wants. What is important is he who will be able to partner Dr. Bawumia to win the election. That is number one. Number two, what is important is he that Dr. Bawumia is comfortable in working with. You, I'm sure, have read Ghana's political history at one point in time that a president had to beat up his vice president. And so you should be careful, we should be careful in determining who must partner Dr. Bawumia. The key, a second consideration is he that Bawumia himself is comfortable in working with. That's number two. Number three, what is important is he who would be able to go beyond the party support base to reach out to election kingmakers. NPP support base would always be there, even though their support base, I would say, and anybody can tickle himself and laugh, even though their support base has been scattered, especially in the Asante region, it's been scattered a little by, the alarm factor. But if you take that away, the support base of the NPP, they will be there. But they are not enough, especially that Alan has bruised them. The support base will not be enough to make them win any election. And so you are looking for a candidate who will be able to help Dr. Bawumia to go into the other political divide and also to appeal to floating voters, win them to the side of Dr. Bawumia. And then also another consideration is you are look, I will tell you this, whether we like it or not, there are certain truths that people would want to discuss behind the scenes. But I will tell you plainly that whether we like it or not, Ghana is made up of over 70% Christians. The other religions can share the rest of the 30%. And he who will be able to help Dr. Bawumia enough is he who the Christian folks will feel comfortable. He will be able to attract the Christian support base to balance the religion of Dr. Bawumia, to make the Christians also feel a bit comfortable. So, and then maybe the last thing, last but not the least, is he that Ghanaians are comfortable that, look, should Dr. Bawumia not be there, he would be enough. He would have the adequate persona, the temperament, the sobriety, the statesmanliness to be able to serve as the acting president in the absence of Dr. Bawumia. I mean, these are the considerations that we must look out for. So if you go and conduct a survey among 516 party executives without talking to or looking at the preference of the man himself who is required to be selected as running mate. A lot of disservice to him, and you put a lot of pressure on him. Because at the end of the day, if the party support is this is what we want, and then if the man that the party people say they want, the Bawumia himself is not comfortable with, then what happens? Are we going to have a repetition of Rollins and Aka? Or that kind of situation where you have a president running the show all by himself, taking all the burdens because he may not be comfortable with whoever the party wants. And so for me, this is crucial decision for Dr. Bawumia himself to take. It is not about what the party wants. It's about what the candidate himself wants, and it's about who can partner him to effectively reach out to the other support base across the party's divide to be able to bring more votes to him, to make him win. As for the core support base, Ashanti votes and all that, like I said, even though Alan has taken some of the votes, away already, they would always be there.
Yeah, and to that point, the 2 points that I want to quickly explore, both with Miracles and also with Professor Kwapon. And Miracles, to you first. This, it's a fact that Bawumia is the first Muslim candidate to lead your party. So whatever you do, that is a reality you have to sort of deal with. In considering that, though, how is it playing into the decision, even in your campaigning, in your strategy, knowing that he would necessarily have to convince the majority Christian population to also support him? And I noticed something. We were recently just looking at, in his campaigning so far, how many times he's been to a church or visited the clergy. We've counted 13 times, and we may actually be understating it. Is it a significant factor in his decision of who a running mate is?
Like I said earlier, all the ingredients are in the pot, but let's be very sincere with ourselves. There's no science. And I think I depart from Professor Jampo on the point of 70% Christians, and all of that. There is no Christian in this country that picks their voter ID card in the morning on the day of elections and say, I'm going to look for a Christian and vote for them on the ballot paper. It's a flawed argument. There is no science supporting that. There is no evidence, no data supporting that. Indeed, I have always said that if religion played a factor, if religion played a role in electoral decisions, then I don't know who is going to win. Because even the Christian fraternity, I am a Methodist. There are Pentecostals, there are Presbyterians, there are Assemblies of God. So do you know what will happen? In the morning when I pick my ballot paper, my voter ID card, am I going to look for a Christian, or I'm going to look for a Methodist, a Christian who is a Methodist? Then the Pentecost church will also look for a Christian who is a Pentecost church member on the ballot paper. Even in Islam, there's the Ahmadiyya and then other sects within the Islam religion. What are they also going to do? The fact that somebody is a Muslim doesn't mean that he's also going to vote for an Ahmadiyya Muslim or the other sect that I cannot recall. In Christian space, we have the SDAs and we have the Sunday people and all that. So it's a flawed argument. There is no data that supports that. And I don't think it's something that we should even be, something that we cannot verify. We shouldn't even be talking about it. Like I said, politics is science. And there's no evidence that religion and which religious background a political party's candidates influences elections. In a larger sense, every single ingredient may play a role. Ethnic, religion, even how you look, your looks, too tall, too short, handsome. There are people who go to the ballot to go and vote for you because you are handsome. There are people who say, I'm going to vote for this person because he's a nice man, and all of that. But we cannot pick religion and make it a big subject matter when we don't have any data to support that. So it is not a defining factor for us going into these elections. And it's not just us. For all Ghanaians, no voter, and even nobody will debate on this one, no voter picks their ballot, their voter ID card, and go and look for whether there's a Buddhist or there's a Hindu or there's a Christian or a Muslim on the ballot paper to vote for. If that is the case, there will even be confusion on that ballot paper, because even within the religions, there are denominations who even sometimes do not agree on certain principles in the same religion. And I think it's something that we should put aside. I think that, like Professor Dr. Osai Kopon said earlier, the flag bearer is going to take a decision on who brings political capital. And political capital simply means that how many votes are you coming to add to what I have? Simple as that. The second bit is, once I form a government, this is my vision. Who amongst all these people in my party can complement me in the execution of my vision? Evans, these are the two things. These are the two elements that any flag bearer, any candidate needs to be able to decide who a representative should be. There will be so many other sub-ingredients in there, but these are the two overarching points that will be needed in making that decision.
Yeah.
And like I said, this evening, you are discussing something that is not in existence. It's a hypothetical conversation you are having on something that hasn't happened yet. And so it's difficult for me to contribute. But my general comment on this is that in the next few days, weeks, or even a matter of months, it could be tomorrow morning, it could be the next day, it could be a day after tomorrow, the flag bearer would announce. We have our plan, we have our strategy, we have our calendar, and it's not due yet. Once it's due, Evans will be the first to know.
Yeah, and I know that time will come pretty soon. And for every indication, it may happen sooner than later. But let me bring in Professor Kwapon very quickly before we wrap up. Prof, on that point, though.
Evans, you would have to give me the chance to respond to something that Miracle said.
Yes, if you may. Yes. Prof?
Well, you want me to go ahead? Yes, I mean, Dennis Miracle should not play God here. You cannot say that you don't have details to support the influence of religion on voter behavior. If you haven't conducted any study on that, you don't have to be emphatic and make that claim. You should know that some of us, we feed on research. And so if we have not put out outcomes or findings there, it doesn't mean that we are talking from our head. And so he should be open, in looking at some of these things. You heard me say that there are certain things that certain religious people or certain people, some people of certain religious faith would want to discuss or talk about behind the scenes. They don't want to put it even out there. And so if I'm saying that, look, religion will play a role. And so Bawumia should look at who can effectively bring on board the other religious, faith to partner and to balance its candidature. I mean, it's an advice. You can just throw it away. But the point is that he shouldn't make such an emphatic statement when he himself has not conducted any research.
You made an emphatic statement without putting anything out there, or because you said it is
okay, gentlemen.
I don't see.
Okay, gentlemen. I think the 2 points have been made, and let me just quickly get a quick word from Professor Kwapon. Prof, I need to address something for me here on the subject of this conversation around the energy minister. This was done based on party members, but how does he, if indeed he's a man, appeal to everyday ordinary voters beyond the rank and file of the party?
Good question. For me, it would definitely have to, whatever strategy the campaign comes up with, because again, as Dennis said, it would have to be the candidates that can bring him the political capital he can work with, etc., etc. So in making the case beyond the party's base, you just want that individual who can hit the ground running, can crisscross the country with you, can make the case for the party breaking the 8. Whatever it is that you would have to sell in terms of policies, in terms of ideas, how you complement the retail politics, meaning the door-to-door kind of work that Dr. Bawumia is doing. All of those things, for me, would have to be what the energy minister, if And that's a big if he's the, he's the one that is going to be under consideration or would eventually emerge. I mean, and then I think my last point, though, is ultimately and at the end of the day, though, for me, I strongly believe that voters still go to the polls to vote for the presidential candidate. The first time that this question was asked in terms of the influence of the VP candidate, which was a well-done study by Professor Mensah, only a majority said no. Then he conducted the work in 5 regions, and it was sort of like a split. So Greater said yes, it matters. Western, it was split. Central said no. Bono Ahafo, before this, the regions were split. They said no. In 2020, the Irish Research Group, myself, Dr. Theo, and Dr. Khaled, only 25% said it does matter. So at the end of the day, yes, the running mate does bring something, but I still believe that ultimately, when the voter wakes up, they still look at the top of the ticket in making that decision. It doesn't mean that the running mate can't help, but ultimately, it's who is at the top of the ticket that they are still looking at.
I mean, gentlemen, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
You too.